The night hung heavy over Los Angeles, its silence interrupted only by the soft hum of streetlights flickering over an empty supermarket parking lot. It was close to midnight, and the world outside had gone quiet, the kind of stillness that made even the smallest sound feel amplified. Keanu Reeves pulled into the lot on his black motorcycle, the engine's low growl fading as he parked near the entrance. Dressed in a simple black hoodie and worn jeans, he carried himself without a trace of celebrity, just another man running a late-night errand. But as he swung his leg off the bike, something caught his eye. A small, weathered sedan parked in the far corner of the lot, its windows fogged from the inside. At first, it was nothing unusual. Los Angeles was full of cars scattered in forgotten corners, often serving as makeshift shelters for those who had nowhere else to go. But something about this one pulled at him. Maybe it was the faint, rhythmic sound of a baby crying. Keanu froze, his breath hanging in the cold air. The cry was muffled, tired, the kind that came from exhaustion, not just hunger. He took a few careful steps closer, glancing around to see if anyone else noticed. No one did. The lot was almost empty, except for a few shopping carts drifting aimlessly in the breeze. Inside the car, he could see a dim light, the glow of a phone screen illuminating a young woman's face as she tried to soothe a bundled infant in her arms. The woman, no older than 30, looked drained. Her eyes were heavy, her hair tangled from days of neglect, her jacket too thin for the cold night. She rocked the baby gently, whispering something through trembling lips, her hand clutching a half-empty baby bottle. The condensation on the windows framed her like a scene from another world, one hidden from the comforts of the city beyond. Keanu's chest tightened as he watched, unsure of what to do. Should he approach? Would she feel threatened? His instinct told him to help, but his humility held him back. He had always been careful not to impose, especially when it came to strangers in pain. He turned to leave, but something stopped him, a small gesture. The woman, after checking her phone, leaned back and covered her baby with a blanket, then tilted her head against the cold window. Her eyes closed, her breath fogging the glass, and for a fleeting moment, Keanu saw not just a homeless mother, but a person fighting silently against a storm the world had chosen to ignore. That image rooted him in place. He reached for his helmet, then slowly lowered it again. There was a tug inside him, something familiar. Maybe it was the memory of his own past, the losses, the loneliness, the years he'd spent feeling unseen despite fame. As the night deepened, Keanu found himself sitting on the curb a few feet away, pretending to check his phone while watching the car from the corner of his eye. He didn't know her name or her story yet, but one thing was certain: he couldn't just drive away. The universe, it seemed, had led him here for a reason. And while she slept with her child in that old car, unaware that someone was watching over her, a quiet decision was forming in his heart, one that would soon change both their lives forever. Rain began to whisper across the parking lot, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the pavement like 1,000 quiet heartbeats. The city lights blurred through the falling drops, turning the world into a watercolor of muted colors. Keanu Reeves stood beneath the awning of the supermarket, a paper bag of groceries in one hand and an umbrella in the other. He had been watching that same old sedan from afar for nearly an hour. The woman hadn't moved much, just occasionally shifting to keep her baby warm. Every few minutes, the little one would stir, cry softly, then fall back asleep. The car was their home. He could see that now. Clothes were piled in the back seat, a small box of diapers lay open, and the windshield was littered with parking receipts. Keanu hesitated. He knew approaching her could easily go wrong. People living on the edge often built invisible walls to protect what little they had left. But the image of that baby haunted him. He finally opened his umbrella and began walking across the lot, the rain splattering against his boots. His breath clouded in the cool night air as he reached the car. He gently tapped the window. The woman jolted awake. Her eyes darted in fear as she saw a tall man in a hoodie standing outside, holding an umbrella. She fumbled to cover her child, rolling down the window only a few inches. "Sorry to bother you," Keanu said softly, his tone low and careful. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just noticed you've been here a while. Are you okay?" Her lips trembled before she spoke. "We're fine," she said quickly, almost defensively. "Please, we're just resting. We'll move soon." Her words came out rehearsed, the way someone would speak after saying the same thing to strangers who looked at her with pity or suspicion. Keanu didn't leave. He crouched a little to meet her eyes through the narrow opening. "It's cold," he said, nodding toward the baby. "He looks like he could use something warm. Can I get you some food? Coffee, maybe?" For a moment, she just stared at him, trying to read his intentions. The rain ran down her window like tears. Then, her resolve cracked. "You don't have to," she whispered, glancing down at the sleeping infant. "We'll be okay." Keanu smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried no judgment. "Let me," he said quietly. "No strings attached." She finally sighed, exhaustion softening her voice. "His name's Noah," she murmured. "He's 7 months old." "I'm Emma." Keanu's heart sank. There was something in the way she said it, as if she needed to remind herself they still had names, that they still mattered. "Hi, Emma." "Hi, Noah," he replied gently. "I'm Keanu." He didn't expect her to recognize him, and she didn't. In that moment, he wasn't a movie star. He was just a stranger holding an umbrella, trying to keep the rain from touching a woman and her child. She opened up slowly after that. The words came in fragments, her voice breaking with each sentence. She had lost her job as a nurse's aide after missing too many shifts when Noah fell sick. The hospital bills had swallowed everything she owned. Her landlord, cold and impatient, had thrown her out within weeks. She'd tried shelters, but most were full or unsafe for women with infants. For the past month, her car had become their entire world, a fragile shell of metal and hope. Keanu listened without interrupting. The rain around them grew heavier, but his focus never wavered. Every word she said painted a picture of quiet despair, the kind that hides behind tired smiles. When she finally fell silent, staring down at her baby, he noticed her hands trembling, not from cold, but from shame. "You've been doing everything you can," Keanu said softly. "That's what matters." She blinked, surprised by the kindness in his tone. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," he replied. "Sometimes it's enough just to see." For a few seconds, their eyes met, two souls from opposite worlds bound by a simple truth. Pain doesn't discriminate. Keanu stood up, his umbrella tilting slightly as the rain slid down his arm. "Wait here," he said, turning toward the store. "I'll be right back." Emma wanted to stop him but couldn't find the strength. Through the rearview mirror, she watched him disappear into the glowing doors of the supermarket. She looked down at Noah, who was now awake, his tiny hand gripping her finger. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, tears mixing with the rain. "Maybe tonight, someone finally sees us." A few minutes later, Keanu returned, carrying 2 paper bags, one filled with groceries, the other with baby supplies. Formula, diapers, wipes, and a small blanket. He placed them gently on the hood of her car. "This should last a few days," he said, almost apologetic. "I didn't know what brand you use, so I just grabbed a few things." Emma's voice broke. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." He gave her a small nod, then stepped back into the rain, his silhouette fading into the night. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt something she thought she had lost completely: warmth. Not from the blanket or the food, but from the rare kindness of a stranger who asked for nothing in return. As she closed the window, Noah stirred again, his small eyes fluttering open. Emma held him close, whispering softly, "We're going to be okay, baby. I think things might change now." Outside, Keanu stopped under a flickering streetlight, glancing back once more before walking toward his bike. The rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt cold. Something had begun that night, something that would soon reshape both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The morning sun crept over Los Angeles like a hesitant visitor, its light slicing through the mist that lingered from last night's rain. The supermarket parking lot, now buzzing with early shoppers, looked nothing like the place it had been just hours before. But for Emma, everything still felt frozen in time. She sat in the driver's seat, her fingers wrapped around a cup of lukewarm water, staring at the brown paper bags on the passenger side, the ones Keanu had left. She hadn't dared to touch them yet, half afraid they'd vanish like a dream if she did. Noah slept peacefully in the back, wrapped in the new blanket, his small chest rising and falling in a rhythm that soothed her weary heart. When a gentle knock came at her window, she startled again, only to see the same man from last night, standing there with 2 cups of steaming coffee. He smiled faintly through the glass. "Morning," he said. "I didn't mean to wake you. Thought you might need this." Emma hesitated before rolling the window down halfway. "You're still here." Keanu shrugged lightly. "I figured I'd check in. Didn't feel right just leaving things like that." He handed her the coffee, the warmth seeping through her cold fingers. She murmured a quiet thank you, still unsure why a stranger cared this much. Keanu leaned slightly against the car, trying to keep his voice casual. "There's a diner across the street. Best pancakes in town, or at least they used to be," he said with a grin. "Come have breakfast with me." "My treat." Emma immediately shook her head. "I can't. We don't look." She stopped, her eyes lowering to her worn clothes. "People will stare." "Then they'll stare," Keanu replied gently. "They'll forget by lunch." Something in his tone, the calm sincerity, the quiet confidence, disarmed her defenses. Against her own instincts, Emma found herself saying yes. She bundled Noah in the blanket and followed him across the lot, feeling awkward and self-conscious but oddly safe beside him. The diner was small and old-fashioned, with checkered floors and a jukebox that hummed faintly in the corner. As they entered, a bell above the door chimed softly. The waitress behind the counter offered them a polite smile, oblivious to who Keanu Reeves was beneath the hoodie and scruffy beard. They settled into a booth near the window. Keanu slid a menu toward her, but Emma shook her head. "I'll just have coffee." "Emma," he said, his voice firm but kind, "you've probably skipped enough meals this week. Let's eat properly." The way he said it, not as pity, but as simple care, left her no room to argue. She ordered a plate of pancakes and eggs, and when the food arrived, she hesitated before taking the first bite. It had been days since she'd tasted something warm. Keanu pretended not to notice her quiet tears as she ate, instead focusing on Noah, who stared up at him from his carrier with curious, innocent eyes. For a while, they simply talked about small things. About the rain, about how hard it was to find a decent cup of coffee in the city, about how Noah seemed to love the sound of music. Keanu listened more than he spoke, his manner gentle and unassuming. But every time she glanced at him, she noticed something behind his calm, a quiet sadness, like someone who understood too well what it meant to lose and to start over. Finally, when the plates were nearly empty, Emma sighed and said softly, "You don't have to do all this." "Really? You've already done more than enough." "I know," Keanu replied, stirring his coffee. "But sometimes it's not about what we have to do. It's about what we can do." She stared at him for a long moment, trying to understand him. "Why? Why me? You don't even know who I am." Keanu leaned back, his gaze turning thoughtful. "When I was younger," he began, his voice quiet but steady, "I lost people I loved. I learned that life doesn't wait for anyone to be ready. Sometimes it just breaks you. And when it does, the smallest kindness, even from a stranger, can be the thing that keeps you going." He looked at her then, his expression sincere. "You remind me of that." Emma swallowed hard, unable to speak. She looked down at Noah, who had fallen asleep mid-giggle, his tiny hand clutching the edge of her sleeve. In that instant, she realized she hadn't felt safe, truly safe, in months. When they stepped outside again, the city had fully awakened. Cars honked in the distance, the smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery next door, and sunlight glimmered off the wet pavement. Emma thanked him once more, insisting she couldn't repay him. Keanu simply smiled. "You already have," he said, "by trusting me." As they walked back toward the parking lot, Emma noticed him glancing around, almost as if he were searching for something. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "Options," he replied with a hint of a grin. "I think we can find you something better than a parking spot to sleep in." She frowned. "I told you, the shelters are full." "Not all of them," Keanu interrupted softly. "I know a few places. Maybe they'll make room for you and Noah." She didn't believe him at first, assuming it was just another polite promise people made when they didn't know what else to say. But there was something about the certainty in his eyes that made her hope again. A dangerous, fragile kind of hope she'd buried long ago. Keanu walked her back to her car, then crouched beside the driver's door. "Emma," he said carefully, "can you give me one day? Just one. Let me make a few calls." She hesitated, clutching Noah's blanket tighter. I don't want to be anyone's charity. He met her gaze, unwavering. This isn't charity. It's just giving life a little push in the right direction. There was silence between them for a long while, the kind that speaks louder than words. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. One day. Keanu smiled faintly. That's all I need. As he walked away toward his motorcycle, the morning sun caught the edges of his face, casting a soft golden glow. Emma watched him go, still unsure what to make of him. To her, he was just a kind stranger, a man who had appeared from nowhere on one of the worst nights of her life. She couldn't have known that he was already putting things into motion, that he would spend the next 24 hours calling friends, talking to charities, and quietly ensuring that the next time she woke up, it wouldn't be inside a car. Inside that diner and beyond, something had shifted, not just in Emma's world, but in Keanu's. Because sometimes, helping someone else heal becomes the very thing that heals you too. Morning sunlight spilled gently over the Los Angeles skyline, warming the cool edges of the city. For most people, it was an ordinary day, traffic humming, coffee brewing, lives moving forward. But for Emma, sitting behind the wheel of her old sedan in that same parking lot, it felt like waiting at the edge of something unknown. The night had been restless. She had barely slept, alternating between hope and doubt, replaying Keanu's words in her head, "Give me one day." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that someone like him could actually change her fate. Yet, life had taught her to be cautious. People promised things all the time. Social workers, kind strangers, even friends, but they always left. Still, something about Keanu's quiet conviction wouldn't leave her mind. He didn't seem like a man who said things he didn't mean. As she was lost in thought, the roar of a familiar motorcycle echoed in the distance. Her eyes lifted, and there he was, dressed in the same dark hoodie, a helmet under his arm, that calm energy radiating from him. He parked beside her car and waved lightly, his easy smile instantly dissolving the anxious weight in her chest. "Morning," he greeted, his voice casual as ever. "Hope I didn't keep you waiting." She shook her head, still unsure how to begin, her curiosity and nervousness intertwining. He gestured toward the passenger seat. "Follow me. I think I found something." The drive was quiet at first, just a hum of engines and the city slowly awakening around them. Keanu rode ahead, occasionally glancing back to make sure she was still behind him. Emma's heart raced. Every street they turned down brought more questions. Where are we going? What could he possibly have found? But she stayed close, clinging to a fragile sense of faith. After 20 minutes, they pulled up in front of a small building tucked between an elementary school and a park. The sign outside read Haven's Hope Community Center. It wasn't much, a modest 2-story shelter with blooming flowers by the door and the faint smell of fresh paint. Yet to Emma, it looked like a palace. Keanu dismounted and approached her car as she parked. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the entrance. She hesitated, clutching Noah in her arms. "Keanu, I told you. I tried shelters before. They're either full or..." Her voice trailed off as her eyes filled with tears. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "Just trust me," he said. "This one's expecting you." Inside, the lobby was warm and clean, decorated with children's drawings and potted plants. The air carried the faint scent of cinnamon. Someone was baking in the kitchen. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes approached them, a clipboard in hand. "You must be Emma," she said with a warm smile. "And this little guy must be Noah." Emma froze. "You know my name." The woman laughed softly. "Of course. Mr. Reeves called early this morning. Said we'd be meeting 2 very special guests today." Emma turned toward Keanu, eyes wide. "You called them?" He shrugged lightly. "I might have made a few phone calls," he admitted. "They had a room open, and I covered a few months of rent to make sure you don't have to worry for a while." Her breath caught in her throat. "You what?" "Keanu, I can't." He stopped her gently. "You can, and you will. Think of it as a head start, not a handout." His tone was firm but kind, the kind of kindness that didn't seek recognition. "You told me you wanted to get back to work, maybe nursing again. This place has a child care program. You can get certified here, too." The woman with the clipboard smiled. "He's right. We have a partnership with the local hospital. We help single mothers get back on their feet. Training, housing, childcare. You're already enrolled, dear. You start next week." Emma stood there speechless, her mind spinning. She looked down at Noah, who was smiling up at her, then back at Keanu. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll try," he replied softly. "That's all." She nodded slowly, tears streaming freely now, not from pain this time, but from something much rarer, relief. She hadn't felt safe in months. The thought of sleeping in a real bed, of Noah having a crib, of waking up without fear of being asked to move her car, it felt like a miracle. As they walked through the center, the manager showed them the room. Small but beautiful, painted in soft yellow with a window that looked out over the park. A tiny crib stood in the corner, already made up with clean sheets and a stuffed bear resting on the pillow. Emma pressed her hand to her mouth as a sob escaped her. "You did all this?" she asked in disbelief. Keanu shook his head. "Not me. The people here did. I just made sure you found them." He paused for a moment, his eyes soft. "You've been fighting alone for too long. You don't have to anymore." For the first time, she smiled, a real, full smile that reached her eyes. She looked younger, lighter, as though the years of struggle had peeled away in that instant. She stepped forward, hugging him tightly, the kind of embrace that said everything words couldn't. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't even know what this means to us." Keanu returned the hug briefly, then stepped back, his usual quiet humility settling in again. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Just promise me one thing, that you'll believe you deserve this." She nodded through tears. "I will." They stood together for a moment, sunlight pouring through the window, washing the room in gold. Noah cooed in her arms, reaching toward Keanu, who smiled and gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "He's going to grow up knowing his mom's a fighter," he said softly. "That's the best start anyone can have." As they walked back toward the door, Emma turned to him one last time. "I don't even know who you really are," she said with a shaky laugh. "You just showed up one night like some kind of angel." Keanu chuckled lightly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm no angel," he replied. "Just someone who knows how it feels to need one." Before he left, he handed her a small envelope. "Open this later," he said, "when you've had time to breathe." Then, with that same calm grace, he put on his helmet and headed toward the door. The sound of his motorcycle faded into the hum of the city, leaving behind the faint smell of rain and something else, hope. Emma stood by the window for a long time after he left, holding Noah close. When she finally opened the envelope, a single note lay inside. Written in neat handwriting, it read, "You don't owe the world perfection, just your perseverance. The rest will follow. K." She pressed the note to her heart and whispered, "Thank you." Then she looked around the small room, her new beginning, and for the first time in a long, long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were finally going to be okay. Days passed, and the city of Los Angeles began to whisper about the mysterious story that had quietly unfolded in a downtown parking lot. News outlets picked it up after a passerby captured a photo of Keanu Reeves sitting on the pavement beside a rusty old car, handing a warm meal to a homeless mother and her baby. The image went viral, not because it featured a celebrity, but because of the humanity it captured. Keanu hadn't done it for attention. He had done it because he saw people, not status. Yet the world saw in that image something deeply needed, proof that kindness still existed in a world that often looked away. The story inspired donations to local shelters, and thousands of comments poured in from people sharing how it reminded them to slow down, to notice, and to care. Meanwhile, Keanu didn't let the attention change his intent. He continued visiting the shelter quietly, often in the evenings, bringing food, blankets, and, more importantly, time. He'd sit and listen to stories from people who had fallen through the cracks of society. He understood them in a way most didn't. People surviving grief, heartbreak, and loss. Each conversation was a reminder that life wasn't about wealth or fame, it was about connection. Sometimes, he would find himself holding the baby girl he had once met in that cold parking lot, now giggling and grabbing at his beard as he laughed softly. That sound, innocent, pure, alive, felt like healing. In those moments, he wasn't a movie star or a philanthropist. He was simply a man who had found meaning again through compassion. One afternoon, as Keanu helped the shelter staff carry supplies inside, he noticed the mother, Elena, handing out meals to newcomers. Her face had changed. The deep exhaustion had softened, replaced by quiet confidence. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was helping others survive. After getting settled into her new apartment, thanks to Keanu's help and a small fund he created, Elena had insisted on volunteering at the same shelter that once saved her. "You gave me a second chance," she told him one day as they loaded boxes together. "Now I want to be that person for someone else." Keanu smiled, humbled. "You already are," he replied. The sincerity in his voice was unshakable. He knew the real hero of the story wasn't him, it was her. She had fought, endured, and risen, proving that hope, even when buried under despair, can bloom again. As time went on, Keanu's quiet act of kindness continued to echo far beyond the city. The foundation he created in Elena's name grew, funding transitional housing for single mothers and their children across the state. But he refused to have his name attached to it. "Let it be about them," he said, "not me." He believed that real kindness was never about recognition, it was about restoration. On the first anniversary of that fateful encounter, Elena invited him to dinner, not at a restaurant, but at her modest home. The baby, now toddling, ran to him with open arms. The table was set simply: pasta, bread, and a small candle in the middle. "You changed our lives," Elena said quietly as they ate. Keanu shook his head gently. "No," he said with that soft smile of his, "you changed mine." That night, as Keanu drove home beneath the city lights, he reflected on how something as ordinary as noticing someone in pain had turned into something extraordinary. The world was full of noise, of flashing headlines and shallow gestures, but this was real. One moment of awareness had rippled outward, touching lives he'd never meet. He realized that compassion didn't require wealth, fame, or grandeur, it only required the willingness to see. As the city blurred past his car window, he whispered a silent vow to keep seeing, to keep noticing the unnoticed, to keep choosing empathy over apathy. And though the world would move on, forgetting headlines and photos, somewhere deep within the heart of Los Angeles, a mother and her child slept peacefully that night, because one man chose kindness over convenience. And in doing so, he reminded the world that sometimes the smallest act of humanity can spark a lifetime of hope.